Hari Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Sachinandan Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Oh красивый Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Rama Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Rama. Okay. Через минутку будет я должен читать Prabhupada-lilamrita. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Это возможно для вас слышать и смотреть. Да. Возможно, да?
Да.
Окей, окей, хорошо. 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 Сачинандан. Увидимся позже. До свидания, мальчик. Я думаю, что я должен закончить Zoom. И новый Zoom будет. Хорошо. Okay. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nira Vishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadesh Tarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, continuing, they've been doing kirtan at Tompkins Square Park. Some people have been making sort of remarks and being kind of rude, but they have carried on, and particularly Prabhupada. Walking back home in the early evening, past the shops and crowded tenements, followed by more than a dozen interested new people from the park, the Swami again sustained occasional shouts and taunts. But those who followed him from the park were still feeling the aura of an ecstasy that easily tolerated a few taunts from the street. Prabhupada especially was undisturbed. As he walked with his head high, not speaking, he was gravely absorbed in his thoughts. And yet his eyes actively noticed people and places and exchanged glances with those whom he passed on his way along 7th Street, past the churches and funeral homes, across First Avenue to the noisy, heavily trafficked 2nd Avenue, then down 2nd, past liquor stores, coin laundries, delicatessens, past the Iglesia Alianza Cristiana Missionera, the Kohinoor Intercontinental Restaurant Palace, then past the Church of the Nativity, and finally back home to number 26. There was a crowd of people from the park standing on the sidewalk outside the storefront, young people waiting for him to arrive and unlock the door to matchless gifts. They wanted to know more about the dance and the chant and the elderly Swami and his disciples who had created such a beautiful scene in the park. They filled the storefront. Outside on the sidewalk, the timid or uncommitted loitered near the door or window, smoking and waiting or peering in and trying to see the paintings on the wall. Swamiji entered and walked directly to his dais and sat down before the largest gathering that had ever graced his temple. He spoke further of Krishna consciousness, the words coming as naturally as breathing, as he quoted the Sanskrit authority behind what they had all been experiencing in the park. Just as they had all chanted today, he said, so everyone should chant always. A long-haired girl sitting close to Swamiji's dais raised her hand and asked, seemingly in trance, when I am chanting, I feel a great concentration of energy on my forehead, and then a buzzing comes and a reddish light. Just keep on chanting, Swamiji replied. It will clear up. Well, what does the chanting produce? She seemed to be coming out of her trance now. Chanting produces chanting, he replied. Just as when you're calling the name of your beloved, if there's someone you love very much, then you want to repeat his name again and again. It is out of love. A man spoke up without raising his hand. But isn't it just a kind of hypnotism on sound? Like if I chanted Coca-Cola over and over? Wouldn't it be the same? No, Prabhupada replied. You take any word, repeat it for 10 minutes, and you will feel disgusted. But we can chant 24 hours, and we don't feel tired. Oh, we feel new energy. The questions seemed more relevant today. The guests had all been chanting in the park, and now they were probing philosophically into what they'd experienced. The Swami's followers marked this as a victory, and they felt some responsibility as hosts and guides for the others. Swamiji had asked Kirtanananda to prepare some prasadam for the guests, and soon Kirtanananda appeared with small paper cups of sweet rice for everyone. The chanting process is just to cleanse the mind, said Prabhupada. We have so many misunderstandings about ourselves, about this world, about God, and about the relationships between these things. We have so many misgivings. This chanting will help to cleanse the mind. Then you will understand that this chanting is not different from Krishna. A boy who was accompanying the long-haired girl spoke out incoherently. Yes, no, I. Prabhupada, yes, yes, yes. In the beginning we have to chant. We may be in whatever position we are. It doesn't matter. If you begin chanting, the first benefit will be Cheto Darpana Marjanam. The mind will be clear of all dirty things. And the next stage will be that the sufferings, the miseries of this material world will subside. Boy, well, I don't quite understand what the material world is because, Prabhupada, the material world is full of sufferings and miseries. Don't you understand that? Are you happy? Boy, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm not. Prabhupada, no, you are not happy. That sometimes is your imagination. Just like a diseased man says, oh yes, I'm well. What is that well? He's going to die and he's well? Boy, I don't claim any ultimate happiness. Prabhupada, no, you do not know what happiness is. Boy, but it's greater or lesser. Prabhupada, yes, you do not know what is happiness. An older man standing with his arms folded near the rear of the temple said, well, of course, that sorrow or that suffering might add the spice to make that suffering that goes in between seem happiness. Prabhupada. That's a good one. Krishna. No, the thing is that there are different kinds of miseries. That we all understand. It is only due to our ignorance that we don't care for it. Just like a man who's suffering for a long time, he has forgotten what is real happiness. Similarly, the sufferings are there already. For example, and he directed himself to the young man with his girlfriend. Take for example that you're a young man. Now, would you like to become an old man? Boy, I will become an old man in the process of, Prabhupada, you will become means you'll be forced to become an old man, but you don't like to become an old man. Boy, I'm not going to be forced to become an old man. Prabhupada, yes, forced. You'll be forced. Boy, I don't see why. Prabhupada, if you don't want to become an old man, you'll be forced to become an old man. Boy, It's one of the conditions of Prabhupada. Yes, that condition is miserable. Boy, I find it not miserable, Prabhupada, because you're a young man. But ask any old man how he is suffering, you see? A diseased man. Do you want to be diseased? Boy, I wouldn't search it out. Prabhupada, Boy, I wouldn't search it out. Prabhupada, no. Just answer me. Do you like to be diseased? Boy, what is disease? Prabhupada, just answer. Boy, what is disease? Prabhupada. Oh, you've never suffered from disease? You've never suffered from disease? Prabhupada looks dramatically incredulous. Like, what? Yeah. Boy, I've had the mumps and the measles and whooping cough, which is what everyone has, and you get over it. Some people in the audience laugh. Prabhupada, everyone may be suffering, but that does not mean that it is not suffering. We have to admit that we're always in suffering. Boy, if I have never known happiness, I feel sure I've never known suffering either. Prabhupada, that is due to your ignorance. We are in suffering. We don't want to die, but death is there. We don't want to be diseased, but disease is there. We don't want to become old. Old age is there. We don't want so many things, but they're forced upon us. And any sane man will admit that these are sufferings. But if you're accustomed to take these sufferings, then you say it is all right. But any sane man won't like to be diseased. He won't like to be old, and he won't like to die. Why do you have this peace movement? Because if there is war, there will be death. So people are afraid. They're making agitation. There should be no war. Do you think that death is a very pleasurable thing? Boy, I've never experienced. Prabhupada, you have experienced and forgotten. Many times you've died. You've experienced, but you've forgotten. Forgetfulness is no excuse. Suppose a child forgot some suffering. That does not mean he did not suffer. Boy, no, I agree. Prabhupada, yes. So suffering is there. You have to take direction from realized souls, from authorities. Just like in Bhagavad Gita it is said, Dukhalayam ashashvatam. This world is full of miseries, so one has to realize it. Unless we understand that this place is miserable, there is no question of how to get out of it. A person who doesn't develop this understanding is not fully developed. Just like the animals, they don't understand what misery is. They're satisfied. It was late when he finally returned to his apartment. One of the boys brought him a cup of hot milk, and someone remarked they should do the chanting in the park every week. Every day, he replied. Even while half a dozen people were present, he lay down on his thin mat. He continued to speak for some minutes, and then his voice trailed off, preaching in fragmented words. He appeared to doze. It was 10 o'clock. They tiptoed out, softly shutting the door. October the 10th. It was early. Swamiji had not yet come down for class, and the sun had not yet risen. Satswarup and Kirtanananda sat on the floor of the storefront, reading a clipping from the Morning Times. Satswarup: has the Swami seen it? Yes. Kirtanananda: yes, just a few minutes ago. He said it's very important. It's historic. He especially liked that it was the New York Times. Satswarup reading aloud: Swami's flock chants in park to find ecstasy. And the article continues. 50 followers clap and sway to hypnotic music at East Side ceremony. Sitting under a tree in a Lower East Side park and occasionally dancing, 50 followers of a Hindu Swami repeated a 16-word chant for 2 hours yesterday. Satswarup: it was more than 2 hours. For 2 hours yesterday afternoon, to the accompaniment of cymbals, tambourines, sticks, drums, bells, and a small reed organ. Repetition of the chant, Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta says, is the best way to achieve self-realization in this age of distraction. While children played on Hovings Hill, a pile of dirt in the middle of Tompkins Square Park. Hovings Hill, Satswarup, Hovings Hill, Kirtanananda. I think it's a joke named after the Parks Commissioner, Satswarup. Oh, and continuing the reading. Hovings Hill, a pile of dirt in the middle of Tompkins Square Park, or bicycled along the sunny walks. Many in the crowd of about 100 persons standing around the chanters found themselves swaying to or clapping hands in time to the hypnotic rhythmic music. It brings a state of ecstasy, said Allen Ginsberg, the poet, who was one of the celebrants. For one thing, Allen Ginsberg said, the syllables force yoga breath control. Whoa. Okay. Well, Prabhupada did say that when we chant, we breathe, and it's a form of pranayama, actually. That's one physiological explanation. Satswarup and Kirtanananda laughing, that's nonsense. But, you know, I saw what they were saying, but still I made that comment because Prabhupada did say it, that when we chant, then there's regular breathing. So it's a form of pranayama. So the article continues. The ecstasy of the chant or mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kirtanananda, the Swami said that's the best part because they've printed the mantra. It's all perfect. Whoever reads this can be purified, just the same as if they had chanted. Satswarup continuing. So the mantra has replaced LSD and other drugs for many of the Swami's followers, Mr. Ginsberg said. He explained that Hare Krishna, pronounced Hare, is the name for Vishnu, a Hindu god, as the bringer of light. Rama, pronounced Rama, is the incarnation of Vishnu as the prince of responsibility. Satswarup, what? Where did he get that? It sounds like something out of an encyclopedia. And the reading continues. The chant, therefore, names different aspects of God, Mr. Ginsberg said. Satswarup, why so much from Mr. Ginsberg? Why not Swamiji? The reading continues. Another celebrant, 26-year-old Howard M. Wheeler, who described himself as a former English instructor at Ohio State University, now voting his full time to the Swami, said, I myself took 50 doses of LSD and a dozen of peyote in 2 years, and now nothing. Laughter from both of them. And back to the article. The Swami orders his followers to give up all intoxicants, including coffee, tea, and cigarettes, he said in an interview after the ceremony. In this sense, we're helping your government, he added. However, he indicated the government apparently has not appreciated this help sufficiently. For the Department of Immigration recently told Swami Bhaktivedanta that his 1-year visitor's visa had expired and that he must leave, he said. The case is being appealed. The Swami, a swarthy man with short-cropped greyish hair and clad in a salmon-coloured robe over a pink sweater, said that when he first met his own teacher or guru in 1922, he was told to spread the cult of Krishna to the Western countries through the English language. He said, therefore, in this old age, 71, I've taken so much risk. Satswarup. It says that we're going to come there and chant every Sunday. And quote from the article, his followers include some social workers, unquote. Satswarup, I guess that's me. Kirtanananda, I think this article will bring a lot of new people. The Swami came down for class. The morning was chilly, and he wore a peach-colored turtleneck jersey his disciples had bought for him at a shop on Orchard Street. They had also started wearing such jerseys, a kind of unofficial uniform. Swamiji didn't mention the Times article. He began singing the Sanskrit prayers, Vandeham Shri Guru. I offer my obeisances to my spiritual master. Then he began singing Hare Krishna, and the boys joined in. Sing softly, Prabhupada cautioned them. But no sooner had he spoken than water began pouring down through the cracks in the ceiling. The man upstairs didn't like early morning kirtans, and he began stomping his feet to show that this flood was no accident. What is this? Prabhupada looked up, disturbed, but with a touch of amusement. The boys looked around. Water was pouring down in several places. Get some pots, he said. A boy ran upstairs to Swamiji's apartment to get pots from the kitchen. Soon 3 pots were catching the water as it dripped in 3 separate places. How does he do it? Asked Umapati. Is he pouring water onto the floor? Prabhupada asked. Is he pouring water onto the floor? Prabhupada asked Brahmananda to go up and speak to the man, to tell him that the kirtan would be a quiet one. Then he asked everyone to sit back down amid the dripping and the pots and continue chanting. Softly, he said, softly. That evening, the temple was filled with guests. It is so much kindness of the Supreme Lord, Prabhupada said, that he wants to associate with you. So you should receive him. Always chant Hare Krishna. Now this language is Sanskrit, and some of you do not know the meaning. Still, it is so attractive that when we chanted Hare Krishna in the park, old ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, all took part. But there are also complaints. Just like we're receiving daily reports that our Sankirtan movement is disturbing some tenants here. Ravindra Swarup was walking down 2nd Avenue on his way to the Swami's morning class when an acquaintance came out of the Gem Spa candy and news store and said, "Hey, your Swami is in the newspaper. Did you see?" "Yeah," Ravindra Swarup replied, "the New York Times." "No," his friend said, "today." And he held up a copy of the latest edition of the East Village Other. The front page was filled with a 2-color photo of the Swami, his hands folded decorously at his waist, standing in yellow robes in front of the big tree in Tompkins Square Park. He was speaking to a small crowd that had gathered around, and his disciples were at his feet. The big steeple of St. Bridget's formed a silhouette behind him. Above the photo was a simple headline, "Save Earth Now," and beneath was the mantra, "Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare." Below the mantra were the words, "See centerfold." That was the whole front page. Ravindra Swarup took the newspaper and opened to the center, where he found a long article and a large photo of Swamiji with his left hand on his head, grinning blissfully in an unusual casual moment. His friend gave him the paper, and Ravindra Swarup hurried to Swamiji. When he reached the storefront, several boys went along with him to show Swamiji the paper. "Look," Ravindra Swarup handed it over. "This is the biggest local newspaper. Everybody reads it." Prabhupada opened his eyes wide. He read aloud, "Save Earth Now." And he looked up at the faces of the boys. Umapati and Hayagriva wondered aloud what it meant. Save Earth Now. Was it an ecological pun? Was it a reference to staving off nuclear disaster? Was it poking fun at Swamiji's evangelism? "Well," said Umapati, "after all, this is the East Village Other. It could mean anything." "Swamiji is saving the earth," Kirtanananda said. "We're trying to," Prabhupada replied, "by Krishna's grace." Methodically, he put on the eyeglasses he usually reserved for reading the Bhagavatam, and carefully appraised the page from top to bottom. The newspaper looked incongruous in his hands. Then he began turning the pages. He stopped at the centerfold and looked at the picture of himself and laughed, then paused, studying the article. So, he said, read it. He handed the paper to Hayagriva. Once upon a time, Hayagriva began loudly. It was a fanciful story of a group of theologians who had killed an old man in a church, and of the subsequent press report that God was now dead. But the story went on. Some people didn't believe it. They dug up the body and found it to be not the body of God, but that of his PR man, organized religion. At once the good tidings swept across the whole world. God lives, but where was God? Hayagriva read dramatically to an enthralled group as follows, quote, a full-page ad in the New York Times offering a reward for information leading to the discovery of the whereabouts of God and signed by Martin Luther King and Ronald Reagan brought no response. People began to worry and wonder again. God, said some people, lives in a sugar cube. The thing is, they used to put LSD in sugar cubes and take it like that. It was very common. And in this way, they'd find God, so to speak. Others whispered that the sacred secret was in a cigarette, in other words, smoking marijuana. But while all this was going on, an old man, 1 year past his allotted 70, wandered into New York's East Village and set about to prove to the world that he knew where God could be found. In only 3 months, the man, Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta, succeeded in convincing the world's toughest audience, bohemians, acid heads, potheads, and hippies, that he knew the way to God. Turn off, sing out, and fall in. I explained that yesterday. This new brand of holy man, with all due deference to Dr. Leary, has come forth with a brand of consciousness expansion that's sweeter than acid, cheaper than pot, and non-bustable by the fuzz. How is all this possible? Through Krishna, the Swami says. The boys broke into cheers and applause. Achyutananda apologized to Swamiji for the language of the article. He said, it's a hippie newspaper. That's all right, said Prabhupada. He's written it in his own way. But he has said that we are giving God. They're saying God is dead, but it is false. We are directly presenting, here is God. Who can deny it? So many theologians and people may say there is no God, but the Vaishnav hands God over to you freely as a commodity. Here is God. So he has marked this. It is very good. Save this paper. It is very important. The article was long. For the cynical New Yorker, it said, living, visible, tangible proof can be found at 26 2nd Avenue, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between 7 and 9. The article described the evening kirtans, quoted from Prabhupada's lecture and mentioned, quote, a rhythmic, hypnotic 16-word chant, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, sung for hours on end to the accompaniment of hand-clapping, cymbals and bells, unquote. Swamiji said that simply because the mantra was there, the article was perfect. The article also included testimony from the Swami's disciples. Quote, I started chanting to myself, like the Swami said, when I was walking down the street. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, over and over. And suddenly everything started looking so beautiful. The kids, the old men and women, even the creeps looked beautiful, to say nothing of the trees and flowers. It was like I had taken a dozen doses of LSD. But I knew there was a difference. There's no coming down from this. I can always do this anytime, anywhere. It is always with you, unquote. Without sarcasm, the article referred to the Swami's discipline forbidding coffee, tea, meat, eggs, and cigarettes, to say nothing, quote, to say nothing of marijuana, LSD, alcohol, and illicit sex, unquote. Obviously, the author admired Swamiji, quote, the energetic old man, a leading exponent of the philosophy of personalism, which holds that the one God is a person, but that his form is spiritual, unquote. The article ended with a hint that Tompkins Square Park would see similar spiritual happenings each weekend. There, quote, there in the shadow of Hoving's Hill, God lives in a trance-like dance and chant. Okay, October the 12th. October the 12th. Okay, let's continue. It was to be a love pageant rally marking California's new law prohibiting the possession of LSD. The rally's promoters urged everyone to come to Tompkins Square Park in elaborate dress. Although the devotees had nothing to do with LSD laws, they took the rally as another opportunity to popularize the chanting of Hare Krishna. So they went with the Swami's blessings, carrying finger cymbals and a homemade tambourine. The devotees looked plain in their dark jeans and lightweight zippered jackets. All around them the dress was extravagant, tie-dyed shirts, tie-bleached jeans, period costumes, painted faces. There was even a circus clown. Tully Kupferberg of the Fugs rock band carried an American flag with the stars rearranged to spell L-O-V-E, love. But so far, the rally had been a dud, just a strange set of drugged young people milling near the large tree where Swamiji had chanted and spoken just a few days before. Swamiji's boys made their way through the crowd to a central spot and started chanting Hare Krishna. A crowd pressed in close around them. Everyone seemed to be in friendly spirits, just unorganized without any purpose. The idea behind the rally had been to show love and a pageant of LSD vision, but not much had been happening. Someone was walking around with a bucket of burning incense. Some hippies sat back on the park benches watching everything through colored glasses. But the kirtan was attractive, and soon a crowd gathered around the boys as they chanted. Kirtanananda, his shaved head covered with a woolen cap, stood beside tall Jagannath, who, with his dark-framed glasses and wavy hair, looked like a great horned owl playing hand cymbals. Umapati, also playing hand cymbals, looked thoughtful. Brahmananda sat on the ground in front of them, his eyes closed and his mouth widely open, chanting Hare Krishna. Beside him and looking moody sat Raphael, and next to him, ascetically thin-faced Ravindra Swarup. Close by, a policeman stood watching. The hippies began to pick up the chanting. They had come together, but there had been no center, no lecture, no amplified music. But now they began clapping and swaying, getting into the chanting as if it were their single purpose. The chanting grew stronger, and after an hour the group broke into a spontaneous dance, joining hands and singing out, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. They skipped and danced together, circling the tree and Swamiji's disciples. To the hippies, it was in fact a love pageant rally, and they found the love and peace they were searching for. It was in the mantra. Hare Krishna had become their anthem, their reason for coming together, the life of the love pageant rally. They didn't know exactly what the mantra was, but they accepted it as something deep within the soul, a metaphysical vibration. They tuned in to it. Even the clown began chanting and dancing. Only the policeman remained aloof and sober, though he also could see that the new demonstration would be a peaceful one. The dance continued, and only the impending dusk brought the love pageant rally to a close. The devotees hurried back to Swamiji to tell him all that had happened. He had been sitting at his desk translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. Although he had not been physically present at the kirtan, his disciples had acted on his instruction. So even without leaving his room, he was spreading the chanting of Hare Krishna. Now he sat, waiting for the report. They burst into his room with shining eyes, flushed faces, and hoarse voices, relating the good news. Not only had they dutifully chanted, but hundreds of people had joined them and sung and danced in a big circle in a spirit of unity. Swamiji, you should have seen, Brahmananda exclaimed, his voice now exhausted from chanting. It was fantastic, fantastic. Prabhupada looked from one face to another, And he also became like them, elated and hopeful that the chanting could go on like this. They had proved that their chanting of Hare Krishna could lead the love and peace movement. It could grow, and hundreds could take part. It is up to you to spread this chanting, Swamiji told them. I'm an old man, but you are young, and you can do it. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.